Hey guys, it's Mike Mass. After acquiring Apache 64D from the folks at Eagle Dynamics, I decided to produce this film to share some important guidelines in becoming a proficient helicopter pilot. I'll also disclose a few errors I found with Apache's control system, which makes the Apache challenging to fly. This film will also concentrate on the importance of learning the hovering and ground work without the aid of automated features, such as forced trims, hover and attitude holds, or special curves. Regretfully, most helicopter and sim pilots choose to avoid hovering and just lift off into forward flight, where flying a helicopter is no more difficult than flying a Cessna. When returning home, most choose a rolling landing rather than a more difficult hover and a set down. Learning to master a machine first on the ground will open the door to proficient transitions to hover, ground maneuvering, stationary hovering, and precision landings, all which make you a better pilot for evasive flight maneuvering in the field. It's important to note, using automated hover and flight features during the learning stage only hinder and prolong the ability to master a helicopter flying. These features become a crutch and only serve to mask and obscure the real feel of a helicopter. When learning to fly, it's important for the pilot to be exposed to all these instabilities to master the machine. Unlike an RC drone with multiple gyros, accelerometers, sensors, cameras, and GPS navigation stability, both real helicopters and simulator models require pilots to monitor and respond to hundreds of changing variables. Unlike a full-size helicopter where you're in the seat and you feel the machine, sticks, and pedals reacting to flight, all with an open view of the surroundings, with a simulator model, we have to first see the helicopter's movement, then respond with our controls, all with a narrow view of our surroundings. Flying and navigating helicopters and drones with a video downlink and monitor has been around for decades. Back in the 70s, I designed the first aerial RC helicopters with a camera and video downlink to finally break the line-of-sight limitations with models. In 1977, I filed patent disclosures for an aerial platform called Helicam, a 12-foot rotor-span military and 35mm motion picture drone with multi-axis stabilization and a 2-camera downlink system. Here's some of the early 1980 images of Helicam during a contract with Martin Marietta Aerospace. Helicam used a forward-mounted camera for navigation and a second camera underneath for military target acquisition. Getting back to our Apache, as mentioned earlier, the biggest distraction to learning to fly a helicopter is all the automation available. Features such as force trims, hover hold, attitude hold, orbit, and others only serve to mask and prolong a pilot's ability to feel the actual helicopter to develop the needed skills to master the machine. During my many conversations with military helicopter pilots during my contracts at Martin Marietta Aerospace, I found most avoid trims since they want full control of the helicopter. Keep in mind, there is no such thing as a trim helicopter. Unlike a trimmed airplane flying through a column of air, with a helicopter, there are hundreds of variables such as attitude, speed, engine power, tail rotor, collective, wind, temperature. These are all changing second to second, altering the trim of the cyclic and collective and tail rotor. Be aware if you're using trim on cyclic, it will reduce the opposite movement. So if you're using 50% trim to maintain forward flight, it will reduce the rear cyclic from 100% to only 50%. This could be a major problem pulling out of a steep dive or certain death during an AutoRotation, which require full aft cyclic. The only trim feature I recommend is for new pilots using spring-loaded rudder devices. By adding some left trim on the tail rotor allows the pilot to concentrate more on the cyclic to help master hovering. While professional joysticks and collective levers costing $1,000 add to the game, they won't make flying a helicopter any easier, nor make you a better pilot. It all boils down to practice, regardless of what method you choose. If you're in the market for a joystick, I highly recommend the Logitech Extreme Pro. On sale, it sells for around $20 to $30, and it's a great stick because it has very light cyclic and rudder springs and sits lower than other joysticks, making it very comfortable to operate. Getting back to hovering, Even though the Apache is a bit unstable, she can be hovered almost dead still. The trick is, once you stabilize your machine, is to keep it there using only micro movements on the sticks. All too often I see videos of instructors hovering 5 to 10 feet in altitude. This is not really a true hover because the machine is in ground effect and much easier since the disc is sitting on an equal high pressure area. Therefore, if you're not hovering 12 to 15 feet off the deck, you're not experiencing a true hover. Also use caution when hovering out of ground effect not to settle in your own prop wash. Should it happen, avoid adding collective and simply push the cyclic in any direction to steer out of your downwash. While hovering, avoid looking out the windshield. Zoom back and watch the ground underneath you. This provides the best visuals for hovering and precision landings. A great way to get a feel for forward flight is to keep the helicopter in ground effect until you get the hang of it. Somewhat like hovering, this practice makes forward flight much easier since the machine is stabilized by the high pressure area generated underneath the blades. In order to keep the machine in ground effect, limit your power to around 50 to 60%. As you push the stick forward, keep your speed low to avoid entering transitional flight and lifting higher. As soon as you feel comfortable in both hovering and flying the machine in ground effect, create some exercises which force the helicopter both in and out of transitional flight. One such exercise is my 3 bunkers routine. The objective is to perform 360-degree nose-in circles around all 3 bunkers. As the machine reaches the first bunker at a fairly good speed, it will require almost full left tail rotor to position the machine for the 360-degree nose-in circle. During this exercise, the Apache will transition in and out of flight when it gets above 12 feet or in a nose-down position, since the disc is now pushing the high-pressure area away from the disc. This maneuver requires full power and full cyclic to remain in a nose-down position. Even though the DCS Apache can perform auto-rotations, it could use some tuning. Performing an auto-rotation with a hover on the bottom is a rarity. Also, self-induced oscillation is more active during autos. While straight-on auto-rotations are repeatable, when performing 180-degree and 360-degree auto-rotations, you'll need to be right on the mark on the way down to walk away from the machine. Even with good rotor RPM, there is seldom enough kinetic energy to perform a hover. An easy cure for the developers is to simply add tip weight to the main rotor blades. I also noted, even with good RPM, that the cyclic is a bit unresponsive. Providing the RPM is close to 100%, the cyclic should be somewhat normal as when the engine is running. During an auto session, I'll run the APU to prevent the screens from blacking out, and I also use bindings to lower the engine slowly. A good auto-rotation altitude should be around 1,000 feet or higher to allow time to smoothly lower the collective and shut the engine down. As you maintain level of flight at around 125 knots, slowly lower the collective full down while keeping the nose level. Then hold the lower engine key for a few seconds to smoothly lower the engines. From that point, it's just a matter of keeping the speed at around 100 knots as you watch the rotor RPM. If the rotor RPM gets down, add some back cyclic. As the machine reaches around 100 feet, start pulling the cyclic back and slowly to raise the nose. When the speed reduces to around 20 knots, then add collective slowly and reduce speed and land the helicopter. Here's a challenging auto-rotation. It's a standard auto-rotation, except you do a 180-degree turn on approach, then perform a reverse tail-up flare to slow the helicopter, followed by a reverse landing. Okay, let's talk about the DCS Apache itself. First, I would like to congratulate the folks at Eagle Dynamics and the development group for their amazing integration of exact detail, navigation, and working element implemented in the sim model. The minute you climb into the virtual seat, you'll immediately appreciate the thousands of hours required to make this helicopter come to life. Does the DCS model replicate the real Apache helicopter in hover and flight? The answer is not yet. However, like any simulator helicopter, the complexity of the control system takes years to perfect. After evaluating the Apache's hover and flight characteristics, I found the rotor system suffers from two errors, which is a self-induced oscillation, and secondly, a lack of pendulum weight, both which make the Apache challenging to fly. Beginning with oscillation, as the clip shows, when the Apache is trimmed for hands-off forward flight at around 50 knots, the helicopter begins a self-induced oscillation, which continues. Without getting over technical, the reason a helicopter oscillates is because the primary control system is fighting a secondary unwanted input. Therefore, the result is an oscillation to find a common plane. Primary inputs are applied mechanically from the swash plate, where unwanted secondary inputs are introduced to the rotor by other means, such as incorrect rotor hub and blade dampening, balancing, lead lag errors, or even incorrect stabilization. It's important to note the massive offset weight of the fuselage has a major influence on the control system. For this reason, the main shaft is mechanically isolated from the hub and blades through the use of dampeners, which absorb unwanted inputs. Another form of dampening is accomplished by allowing the blades to flex or lead lag in their holders to prevent oscillation or vibration issues. Self-induced oscillation generally occurs in a right and left rolling motion, since this motion requires less effort and energy than a fore-aft pitch movement. This occurs because the forces of the main shaft and the fuselage are not linear or symmetrical in operation. Even though the Apache uses similar throws for both roll and pitch, in real life they're worlds apart in a cyclic response. The reason this occurs is a roll moment right to left only has to move the helicopter on its axis, where a fore-aft input is required to offset the massive weight of the helicopter to include the entire tail section, horizontal stabilizer, and a gyroscopic tail rotor system. The remedy for the Apache's oscillation is for the developers to crunch different numbers regarding the rotor head properties to locate the unwanted input force. The Apache's oscillation may be caused by the lack of pendulum stability, which I'll outline next. The second problem with Apache, it lacks pendulum stability, which makes the Apache challenging to hover and fly. This is a common problem with simulator helicopters. While seldom ever mentioned, all helicopters, regardless of rotor head design or flapping, have a built-in stability factor called pendulum stability, which is overlooked on most simulators. The way pendulum stability works is when a helicopter is in hover or flight, the pendulum weight of the fuselage hanging under the disc attempts to keep the disc somewhat level, which stabilizes the helicopter. Pendulum stability also serves to cancel momentary inputs from the pilot or other inputs such as wind gusts. As the rotor disc receives an input from the pilot or outside force, the disc and fuselage tilt, which in turn upsets the pendulum weight. Once the rotor and fuselage angle is offset, the massive weight of the fuselage, located far below the rotor disc, has a powerful authority from gravity to re-level the helicopter again. This pendulum action is very important for a stable hover since it neutralizes each of the pilot's momentary inputs as he attempts to hover in one spot. The DCS Apache, in both hover and forward flight, does not exhibit this needed pendulum stability. The lack of pendulum weight in flight is obvious, as once the Apache rolls 90 degrees, it easily rolls inverted since there is no weight under the disc to oppose it. The developers need to increase the virtual weight and mass of the Apache fuselage. This in turn will improve the machine's hovering and flight characteristics and add stability to mimic the full-scale aircraft. This same fix may also remedy the Apache's oscillation problem, since the added fuselage weight will oppose oscillation since there is now more weight to upset. In any case, I enjoy flying the Apache and pushing both myself and the machine to the limits. No matter how long you fly, no one will ever reach a point of mastering the machine. There will always be another goal to achieve. Just yesterday, I performed my first reverse roll. This maneuver is completed by flying straight and level backwards at a speed around 50 knots. You'll need to be on top of the tail rotor to keep the tail upwind during the speed up and roll. Presently, the most realistic simulator helicopter, hands down, is the DCS UH1 Huey. This helicopter is one of my favorites, and it's a blast to fly. The UH1 offers realistic hover and flight characteristics. As shown in these clips, the Huey is very predictable, transitioning both in and out of hover as well as in and out of ground effect. Most important, the DCS UH1 offers realistic hover characteristics. In conclusion, I'd like to again thank the development group who created the UH1 and the Apache, and I'll look forward to their future offerings. Thanks for watching.